Coming to your seated posture, cross legs, half lotus or full lotus, or sitting on a chair, arms by your side, palms facing up. As you close the eyes, focus on that space in between the eyebrows and start to take that deep breath in through the nose, engaging the diaphragm, filling up the lungs fully and completely. As you slowly exhale, contract the ribs and let out the last bit of breath as you pull that belly button in towards the spine. Starting all over again, taking that deep breath in through the nose, retaining the breath for a second or two, and then slowly exhale. Allowing each breath to get heavier and heavier as you sink into your personal meditation. Today we're going to continue with part 2 of Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath. Part 2, the advantages of disadvantages and the disadvantages of advantages. He quotes Proverbs 13:7, which says, "Some pretend to be rich, yet have nothing. Others pretend to be poor, yet have great wealth." He starts by talking about Vivek Ranadive. He had decided to coach his daughter's basketball team, and when he did so, he settled on 2 principles. He would speak calmly and softly, as he did in his software company. And the second principle was more important, since he was puzzled by the way Americans played basketball. He is from Mumbai and grew up playing cricket and soccer. The first time he saw a game, he thought it was mindless. Team A would score and then immediately retreat to its own end of the court. Team B would pass the ball in from the sidelines and dribble the ball into Team A end, where Team A was patiently waiting. Then the process would reverse itself. A regulation basketball court is 94 feet long. Most of the time, a team would only defend about 24 feet of that, conceding the other 70 feet. Occasionally, teams played a full court press. That is, they contested their opponent's attempt to advance the ball up to the court, but for only a few minutes. As if there was a conspiracy in the basketball world about how the game ought to be played, and that conspiracy had the effect of widening the gap between good teams and weak teams. Good teams had players who were tall and could dribble and shoot well. Why then would weak teams play the very same way that it allowed the good teams to let them do the very thing they were good at? He looked at his girls, and 2 were good, but the others had never played before. They weren't that tall, they couldn't shoot or adapt to dribbling. His team was made up of little blonde girls that were daughters of nerds and computer programmers. Ranadive knew that if they played the conventional way, if they let their opponents dribble the ball up the court without opposition, they would almost certainly lose. Ranadive had come to America as a 17-year-old with $50 in his pocket. He was not one to accept losing easily. His second principle was that his team would play a real full court press, every game, all the time. The team ended up at the national championships. Suppose you were to total up the wars over the last 200 years that occurred between very large and very small countries. How often do you think the bigger side wins? Ivan Toft put the data together and he came up with 71.5%. Basically, just under a third of the time, the weaker country wins. Toft then asked, what happens in wars between the strong and the weak when the weak side, as David did, refuses to fight the way the bigger side wants to fight, using unconventional or guerrilla tactics? The answer, in those cases, the weaker party's percentage climbs from 28.5% to 63.6%. We think of underdog victories as improbable events. That's why the story of David and Goliath has resonated so strongly all these years. But Toft's point is that they aren't at all. Underdogs win all the time. Why then are we so shocked every time a David beats a Goliath? He then states that there is a set of advantages that have to do with material resources, and there is a set that have to do with the absence of material resources. And the reason underdogs win as often as they do is that the latter are sometimes every bit the equal of the former. For some reason, this is a very difficult lesson for us to learn. We have a very rigid definition of what an advantage is. We think of things as helpful that actually aren't, and think of other things as unhelpful that are. We explore the consequences of that error in David and Goliath. When we see the giant, why do we assume the battle is his for the winning? And what does it take to be that person who doesn't accept the conventional order of things as a given, like David or Vivek Ranadive and his band of nerdy Silicon Valley girls? We'll continue with part 3 next week. As you take another deep breath in through the belly, slowly start to wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, nod your head right to left. Taking one more deep breath in through the nose, and on that exhale, gently open your eyes. Namaste.